France will go to the polls on the 10th of April to elect a new president. Until last year, the presidential race was supposed to be a tight battle, but the war in Ukraine has changed a lot for the French President Emmanuel Macron. With over 10 days to go for the election, Macron's position looks formidable. His popularity has soared, especially because of the Ukraine war. Since the start, Macron has been at the center of the conflict. He's been trying to broker peace, talking to both Russian and Ukrainian sides, and prioritizing Europe's security and concerns. The incumbent is taking his claim for a second term. Macron became France's youngest president in 2017. He runs a centrist political movement to challenge traditional parties, but Macron has had to face problems to push his controversial reforms. In 2018, he was forced to scrap a proposed fuel tax after weeks of Yellow Vest demonstrations. Currently, Macron has a strong chance of winning. He is way ahead of all his rivals in the polls, with many looking at him as a global statesman.
Moi, je me bats pour le projet qui est le mien, pour cette vision qui est celle de l'unité de la France. J'ai essayé de la maintenir pendant ces 5 années. On sait les difficultés, les divisions qui sont là. On ne les a pas toutes corrigées, je suis très lucide. C'est aussi pour ça que je veux continuer à m'engager. On a également, je crois, un projet d'avenir, là où beaucoup d'autres sont dans la nostalgie. Moi, je pense que la France ne réussira pas par ces divisions.
The second key player in the contest is Marine Le Pen. She is the leader of France's far-right National Rally, a party that her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, founded in the early 1970s. The then National Front was considered to be a racist and anti-Semitic party, but Marine Le Pen excluded her own father from the party in 2015. Le Pen calls the party a protector of French values. She has a strong anti-immigrant, anti-European Union message. But what got her in trouble was her close link to Vladimir Putin. With public opinion being overwhelmingly against the Russian president, she has been seeking to distance herself from the leader. The case is somewhat similar with far-right challenger Eric Zemmour. He came into the political scene in 2021, slamming both immigration and Islam. He is even more nationalistic than Marie Le Pen. In fact, he had called for a ban on all first names that are not French. In 2018, he even said that he dreamt of a French Putin, quote-unquote. Zemmour is not a very likable personality in French politics. He once got egged during the presidential campaign as well. The next time, he had water bottles raining on him.
Attention.
The stakes are particularly high for both Le Pen and Zemmour this time around. Opinion polls, in fact, showing they could scoop about a third of the votes. The other key players are Jean-Luc Mélenchon, Valérie Pécresse, and Yannick Jadot. Jean-Luc Mélenchon is the strongest candidate on the left. He is a staunch critic of Emmanuel Macron and has been a prominent supporter of the Yellow Vest protests. He even wants France to leave the NATO. On the other hand, Valérie Pécresse represents the moderate right-wing Republicans in France. As for Yannick Jadot, he is standing for the Greens. The election process is a simple one. 2 rounds of voting will be held 14 days apart. The first round will be taking place on the 10th of April. If one candidate gets over 50% votes, they will be elected as president. If no candidate gets over 50% votes, the 2 candidates with the most votes will be going forward. A second round of elections will then be held on the 24th of April. Whoever wins that will be elected to power. The latest polls indicating that Macron will be securing nearly 27% of the votes in the first round. Marine Le Pen is likely to get 21% of the votes. This would lead to a Macron-Le Pen second round runoff. That's a repeat of the 2017 presidential election. As of now, the biggest issues, including the war in Ukraine, of course, France's economy, immigration policies, the country's security as well. The strong recovery of the French economy is likely to benefit Macron. As for immigration, it features extensively in the far-right's campaign. Far-right leaders have even promised a zero immigration policy. Also, with France having suffered several terror attacks in the last few years, security remains an important and crucial issue. And with us on the broadcast is Morgan Ferd-Malka, a political analyst joining us from Paris. Thanks very much for being here with us. How do you assess the impact that the Ukraine war has had on the French presidential battle? Macron tried to play peacemaker and clearly failed, but to what extent are his efforts in that direction boosting his prospects to return to power?
First of all, I truly hope that his efforts are going to have a true impact on the actual improvement of the situation in Ukraine and the improvement of the diplomatic situation with Russia. I think that everyone hopes that. But in terms of how his diplomatic activity has impacted his own image at home, I would not be as I don't think it is as clear-cut as it is sometimes presented in the media. Emmanuel Macron's activism abroad has not made him more popular among French people. I think that French people have been extremely divided about Macron since the Gilets jaunes, the Yellow Vest crisis and the pandemics, and this has not changed. And people who have polarized against Macron are still against Macron. So he has not won any sympathy. However, there is this mechanical rally towards the safest positions because of the atmosphere of uncertainty created by the war. So mechanically, the war in Ukraine is benefiting Macron in the polls because you don't change a captain in the middle of the storm. You don't change a general in the middle of a war. But in terms of his image in a long-term perspective, I don't think that the impact is as great as one might have hoped.
If you can dissect for us what the latest polls are suggesting at this point, how strong is the possibility of a Macron-Le Pen second-round runoff, which would be a repeat of the 2017 presidential election?
It would be a repeat of the 2017 election, but not only, it would be a repeat of several elections that have since 2002, actually. Of course, the probability is very high, but I wouldn't dismiss the possibility that Mélenchon would actually replace Marine Le Pen in the second round. There are several elements that have to be taken into account besides the traditional opinion polls. The one is that besides traditional media, we now have an election that is playing also on YouTube and on social media, with some studies showing that Macron and Le Pen and the strongest candidates are very low in the polls on those alternative platforms and in these alternative informational spaces. So, of course, this is to be taken with a grain of salt, but on YouTube, it's Mélenchon and Zemmour who are leading the race. So this is to be taken into account. Secondly, the poll that you're referring to, the latest poll by Ipsos, shows that the voting intentions towards Macron and Le Pen are very strong, not only in terms of how many people want to vote for them, but also how sure they are to vote for them. As regards all the other candidates, we have very fluctuating figures. So people are not sure who they're going to vote for. And the battle that is playing right now is the battle for the so-called useful vote or a non-useful vote. That is to say that Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the left-wing candidate, is trying to gather people around the idea of voting useful. Do not vote for the several left-wing candidates that there is. Vote for me because I'm the one with the greatest chance to come through to the second round. And if that happens, then Mélenchon has a chance to be against Macron at the second round.
You spoke earlier of the limited impact that the Ukraine war has had, according to you, on Macron's popularity on the ground. What are the issues then, the factors that are working in his favor at this point in time?
In his favor, so I would say perhaps the thing to pay attention to is the factors that are important to French people, and those factors are as everywhere. It is purchasing power and security. On those two issues, Macron has he is a polarizing figure. So what has worked for him with his constituency works against him with the people who are decided not to vote for him. So in that regard, the economic situation, you were mentioning earlier that the French economy has seen a strong recovery. This is a strong recovery that has been felt in some sectors of the population, not in all. And there are huge swathes of this French population who are very unhappy with the way that living standards are going down and life is becoming more expensive, which is not made easier by the Ukraine crisis and the rising prices for gas and electricity. The second issue is safety and security. And in this sense, I think that the most immediate dossier is not about immigration or terrorism, but the most immediate issue that everyone is talking about right now in France is Corsica. We have this region, Corsica, with very strong regional identity, which for decades has been talking about maybe getting more independence from the mainland. It is an island, so from the mainland. And this is a very, very difficult issue. Corsica has seen some domestic terrorism, and lately there has been a surge in violence on Corsica because of a very intricate story, an assassination of a Corsican militant in prison. Right. And this is something that is taking a lot of attention. So as always, you have to take into account the domestic factors, what is closest to people, the price of bread, and the feeling of security.
Right. Morgan Fatmaka, appreciate very much for joining us on the broadcast and helping us better understand what things are looking like on the ground.
Thank you.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.